Hi. Thank you so much, David, and the team for inviting me. It was a lot of fun to put this together. I call this is my first lecture about the book, the backstory. So there'll be a lot of other things in the book for you to discover. The mysterious Chelsea Hotel. I love this picture, even though it's out of focus. It sort of signifies all the different worlds going on in every room. Some people are asleep, some are up all night partying. And then I added a historic picture because I'm sure some of you are interested. The hotel was built in 1883 or 4, there's a debate. And it was the first apartment house in New York City that had a cafe, a ballroom, and apartments of different sizes so that a mixture of people could live together, rich and not so rich. And it was a utopian idea thought up by Philip G. Hubert, Prisson and Company, who built the building. And this style is often called Queen Anne. Sometimes it's referred to as Gothic. Now things have changed, but in the very beginning there were 300 rooms and 10 floors. And for quite a long time it was the tallest building in New York. Now it has a very rich history of different phases of artists that were drawn to the hotel. So those early years it was a hotel, and then eventually in the 40s, Stanley Bart's father bought the hotel. And Stanley grew up as a kid going with his father to the hotel, and eventually he became this iconic visionary who took over from his father and who made it his mission to have creative people stay at the hotel. One of those creative people was Arthur Miller, who made this his third wife, Inga Marath, who was a Magnum photographer, left him this photograph to Stanley Bart, keeping the 20th century at bay in 1987. I think, you know, we can't stop the future right now, but back then there was a small chance. And then the 100th anniversary celebration, he invited Arthur Miller back. Arthur lived there for quite a few years and had some of his children there. Well, the hotel was an international place, and around Europe, the word spread. You know, when you go to New York, you go to the Chelsea Hotel. Because, you know, we didn't have email, we didn't have fax even in Armand's time when he came to paint. Or Brendan Behan, who came from Ireland. And he had some fame there, but his most famous book is his book about New York. And this is a plaque in front of the hotel. How many of you have walked by the hotel? Quite a few. It says, "To America, my newfound land, the man that hates you hates the human race." Boy, is that appropriate, huh, today? So here's what the hotel looked like in the 60s. Well, circa the cars, that's how I figured it out. It's quite amazing. You can see there was the bait and tackle store, the guitar store, and the remaining El Quixote, and this was the dry cleaning and tailor, who eventually moved back to Greece. Now, the hotel has had many famous people. These are not pictures that I've taken, but to just give you a little background. So Sir Arthur Clarke wrote 2001 Space Odyssey, living in the Chelsea Hotel. And this is Stanley Bart and his son, David Bart, who was expected to take on the legacy of the hotel. It had such meaning for artists that were able to come and spend for 6 months in New York. It wasn't cheap. It was always a good rent, but doable. And this is Yann Kramer, who was a painter from Amsterdam. And, you know, you would write things to Stanley. He would get these notes all the time, you know, "We'll meet you for dinner," and "Can you do this for me?" And he had great relationships with the artists that stayed in the hotel. In the 80s, it was the music scene. I was not there in the 80s, but Stanley had given me this picture of Maria Carey, who stayed there. And this is another very famous person. Her name is Shirley Clark. And when I first moved in, she had just won the Academy Award short for a film about heroin. And he said, you should really meet her. Unfortunately, I didn't go up. There's just so many people, only that you can do, but I never went up to her floor and knocked on her door. But someone told me after that film, she would have 9 projectors going on the wall. She was way ahead of her time in experimental work. And a group gave her a plaque a couple years ago, which is in front of the hotel next time you walk by, to Shirley Clark, and pay homage to her. So this is what the hotel looked like around 2005. We still have the guitar store. The bait and tackle shop had been thrown away by the owners to make more money with some other kind of space. So there was, by 2006, there was some energy like, the hotel needs to be a little bit more like a hip hotel. That boutique hotel idea was getting to the board. But during that time, one of our famous brands was the sign, Hotel Chelsea, and sometimes it would go off and on. So this one night it said Hot Chelsea, and I had been watching to make the shot, and what happens is the moon, it rises just to a really nice place, and then it zips way up to the sky, and I missed it a few times, but this night I ran, got my tripod, and this is one of my iconic pictures. Another iconic picture is this one, which is actually Helen Hunt walking down the steps, and this is a Woody Allen shoot for The Curse of the Jade Scorpion. That was around 2000, and it was exciting to be able to make that shot, because what happened, the people who lived in the hotel in the late 70s and 80s were able to take pictures of the celebrities that stayed there. But today, you need permission. You need to have, emailed or faxed back and forth permissions from their handlers and all of that. Celebrity was never my game. I didn't try to find the celebrities that were in the hotel, but occasionally it would work out, and then it wouldn't work out because I didn't have the right permissions. The lobby was the best part of the hotel, and here you have David Coombs painting, and after I think he painted for a while paying for his room, but then Stanley gave him what he called an artist room. So he lived a few months for free in the hotel and continued doing his round paintings of but the perversion, or whatever you want to call it, the endless use of the iPhone all the time had not happened yet. And we actually would sit together and read and talk. And sometimes if you had a free night, you would dress up and go sit in the lobby, and a friend might walk by and say, hey, I'm having an opening, let's go. So it was definitely a social scene. Oops, sorry. The other social scene was we got our mail the old-fashioned way. Until very recently, now as they're renovating the hotel, they've hidden that. But it was wonderful, because this is where the people who worked during the day got their mail at 5, and the people who partied all night got our mail around 11 in the morning, and you would that's how you would meet your sort of friendship scene. This was the first picture that I took in the hotel that made me realize that I wanted to take pictures in the hotel. I always carried at that time, my camera on my shoulder. And this is 1994, and they came to America from London for Miss Vera's cross-dressing school. And the fellow, they were married, and but this was very early to be open about that, but they loved each other, but he had this thing about women's clothes. So for their anniversary, he got to go to the cross-dressing school that Vera still operates, and they paid me a commission to go in their room and make their portrait. So, and then this was in slide, and they let me keep a few for myself. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So as I evolved in the hotel, I began realizing I was making a book there. So of course I wanted Jean-Claude and Christo, who lived in the hotel when they first came to America. He was working on his storefronts, that he showed at Castelli Gallery. So one of the storefronts, the doorknob that he had was pretty ugly, and he thought, I have a great doorknob here on my bathroom here at the hotel. So he went down to the hardware store, got a cheap one, and that doorknob on that storefront is now in the Hirshon collection. And well, Stanley Bard wrote me a letter about the hotel, and basically he says the most important thing for him was that creative people felt comfortable in the space. So he felt the very thick walls and the windows, the large hallways lent themselves to privacy, so that a band could be playing or artists could be doing things without getting in each other's way. Speaking of that, it was a lot of fun. I lived in 3 rooms, and when I lived on the 3rd floor, this is Ethan Hawke, and he came knocking on my door and said, I want to make a film called Chelsea Walls here, and at this time people actually rented your space, and he said, I'd love to rent your room, it's so cool, I'll give you this amount of money, and he looked at it, studied it, came back twice, and then all of a sudden he said, you know what, it's just not going to work out. So I said, well, in that case, how about a portrait? So this has been one of my important portraits, and it's been published a lot. So what made the hotel known was that these celebrities came to the hotel, and Stanley was very good at always talking to foreign press and keeping the life of the hotel alive, and somehow often in the news. The other group that came here after remember there were the writers, the Kerouacs and that crowd that were there in the 50s and 60s. The 70s were the abstract painters. The 80s were a lot of musicians. And this is Pal Shazar. She did not live there, but which happened often, people rented a room, or a photographer rented a room to take a shot in the hotel. So it was shot at the Chelsea Hotel. So Pal Shazar used this on her cover and of her CD. And it's a Pal Shazar, Shazar, and she has a website. She played at the Living Room, the Lower East Side kind of places. Wonderful singer. This is the room next to mine at the hotel. Virgil Thompson, who for 50 years was a famous music critic, occupied this room till he died. And at his death, they were about to auction off all his material. And a financially in good standing painter named Philip Taffy said, wait. If you let me have this room, Stanley Bard, and let me keep all these things, I will protect it forever. And that worked out. So on the wall here, over here is one of Philip Taffy's paintings, mingled among all the sheet notes, that musicians have, and the decor of the period. It was a beautiful space. And Vogue did a story about it. And I suppose this might be a place to introduce a little bit more. The hotel finally was sold in 2011 to a kind of ruthless landlord named Joseph Chetrick. And at that time, just before that, the board really wasn't happy with how the hotel was becoming a boutique hotel, although we didn't know what that meant for us residents, but things were starting to begin to realize, something might happen here, but we all didn't want that to happen. This is how the beautiful Gothic staircase looks, and the art on the hallways, if there was a space, you were able to put up your own art when you moved in. So it changed as people came and went. And this is one of my iconic pictures that I put in the front of my book, looking down from the 9th floor, this beautiful staircase, from which the skylighting drifted down. It's a self-portrait. This was taken a few years later. It was wonderful to be living with art And in 2006, a photographer, I have another book called Healing Waters, and a filmmaker from Canada asked to license some of my water pictures. And then he saw my room and said, I want to make a film about your career. So he won the Canadian Arts Council grant for $50,000 and photographed me at the hotel and also in Europe and where my gallery was in Paris. So here, this is my self-portrait in sack pose and dress, which he supplied for my shoot. He's continued to rise as a fashion icon. And this picture has been purchased by museums. Some people say it looks like a watercolor on the dress. So when I moved in, that's what the skylight looked like. And the hotel has gone through different phases of different looks, different people. But in 1994, it was a very old skylight. Not too much came through. But they renovated that about 98, and hanging there is Arthur Weinstein's mobiles, which were very beautiful to hang above your head, because on the 9th floor I had access to the 10th floor. These were these beautiful 40s or 50 neons that were on various floors, and I always felt that it was the most minimal picture I ever took. So this is outside my elevator was a Valley Meyer. She lived in the hotel in the early 90s, and I met her very briefly. She was from Amsterdam, and she was actually, she was born in Australia. And very early in her life, she had Maori symbols put on her face, and she had big red hair. So I remember meeting her briefly. And of course, she went on to carry out some very beautiful art in this sort of nature style. So I had this image of her to look at each day. A couple things about that is when I went to Amsterdam, I met a couple who used to always fly to New York to party with her. And the story is Abby Hoffman introduced her to the hotel. And so she was a world traveler, and she would come into the hotel, call up all the dealers, put her pictures on the wall, sell some work, and then go back to her retreat in Italy where she kept animals and made her art. Someone very interesting to look up. This is another floor. The hotel's circulated with art. So on the wall here is a picture of Sid Vicious. People always ask about him from the Sex Pistols. And we have Sally Singer, who still works at Vogue.com, and her husband at the time, Joe O'Neill, they were collegial friends. They have since, I guess, separated or divorced. But Joe has a new book out. Well, he had a book out called Netherlander that won the Penn Prize, and he has a new book called The Dog. So the artists of the last 20 years that I got to know are now coming into their own in this very busy digital culture. This is Suzanne Barcia's room. Everybody got this feeling like you should fix up your own space, because we would go to each other's apartments, you would have people in, you would have parties. It won't be like that in the future, but that's the way it was. And Suzanne Barcia was called the party queen, and she invited me generously to a lot of events. This is a portrait I made of her. She often had a toy party at Christmas where you brought a toy and went to the party. Her husband, which he's not with right now, but David Barton, owned a lot of gyms in New York. And this is Rufus Wainwright, who actually lived in the hotel for a couple of months. Michael Musto, who's still writing about the night scene, and Suzanne. And this is Zaldi, who designed many of her outfits. And eventually he had to move out of the hotel. And hopefully some of you saw that for the last 3 months, the FIT Museum had all her nightlife clothes from 20 years old until the present. The show just closed, but Zaldi was there, and she's wearing her wedding dress. And she's coming into her own. She always was known for these wild eyelashes, and Mac is going to produce them as a product. So I think it's really exciting to not always lean on Janis Joplin and all the names of the past. I wanted to bring you into the future. Also, going to these parties, she had, and she still has, Soho salons at night, and this is Joey Arias. I made his portrait, and this is at a Chinatown club, and this is another club. So you get a little feeling of my personal photography, I guess. This is Rosewood, a performer who's in the book before she became Rosewood. You'll see. Of course, we were just talking earlier, we had a nightclub in the basement, Serena's, so you just, had to just drop downstairs, and but always after 10 or 11 to have a drink and see people. And this is one of my well-known photos of the angel that came to live for a year in the hotel. His mother eventually came and brought him back to Japan. He was a writer. And the woman standing in front, Rachel, and her son, contacted me. This picture was taken 15 years ago, and that little boy there is 15 now. So that was pretty amazing. Of course, this is room 100, where Sid Vicious supposedly stabbed Nancy Sponge and his girlfriend. So many people asked to stay there that finally Stanley just combined 100, 101, 2, 3, and made it into one room, so that didn't have to worry about all these people wanting to see this sort of perpetuate that Sid Vicious story. Well, it was always staying out all night and sneaking in late. As I said, people love to decorate their rooms. This is Gerald DeCock. He's still in the hotel. And this is Robert Lambert. He has a website. He had to also leave the hotel. He's a terrific painter, and you can catch him every day. He puts up a new image that he makes in a cafe, so continuing the art life. One of the benefits of moving in, even though I didn't have a big suite, I had the roof. And I could see the Empire State Building in the summer, which was wonderful, of course, until the hotel was taken over in 2011. Well, eventually, after living on the 8th floor and the 3rd floor, it was very noisy on the 3rd floor. And although I liked my tea outside watching the cars, I needed some quiet. So I had the opportunity to move to the 9th floor, to the back of the hotel. And wouldn't you know it, Abel Ferrara, a New York filmmaker, moved in next door, and he decided he would make a film called Chelsea on the Rocks, because things were getting a little scary about the hotel, whether it was going to be sold or not. And he asked if he could use my room for the shooting. And so this is the shoot. In his film, you can catch it, I think, on the internet. She's playing Janis Joplin, and Grace Jones is playing Joplin's nurse. And the film goes between interviews of real people in the hotel and these fictionalized versions. And as far as the reviews went, this mix didn't take it too far to Sundance, but we had a good time that night. This is one of my iconic shots, looking in the mirror, reflecting back on memories, I guess, and the feeling at the lobby of the hotel. And this is Irene Tadashev. I love this picture, the light on her face. And she lived in the hotel since she was 20, and she had 3 husbands. Each one brought her till she was on the top floor in the biggest apartment. So, Arnold Weinstein. This was my maid. We were allowed in the early years, after the union workers finished their day, to have them come make your bed and sweep, which was very helpful when you're busy trying to run an art life. And I have a wonderful story about how much she helped me in my autobiographical part of my book, which is about 20 pages. More, is the hotel for sale or not? And I think I crumpled it up and said, "Pfft," and then I said, oh, I might need that later. So I saved it. But Stanley persisted and had his daughter try to upgrade the rooms so they were looking a little bit more like a hip hotel. And this was Scott Griffith's room with a Andreas Serrano photo on it. So we had a good time together. Patti Smith came to the hotel only once during this period to read poetry with Herbert Huncke. He did do that once, and he died shortly after that. He lived across the hall from me. He was 83, and he used to knock on my door and ask for $7 for the methadone clinic taxi, promising he would read a poem when he got back. And I love that, and I'm sorry I never photographed him. Living still in the hotel is Nicola L., a French artist, and she also made a film called Doors Ajar, which was on PBS this summer. The hotel belongs to many. And now we're going to watch a little piece of Jeff's film that he made about me shooting in the hotel. The renovated 42nd Street is amazing. I didn't build a body of work about the Chelsea Hotel. It was a kind of like a lake, you know, it just sort of spread out. The hotel is been documented in so many ways.
Let me know when you're done so I can get
it's you know, it's not like fresh material. It's already got so many historic pictures, and a lot of them are portraits and something like that. So, you know, I had to like ooze my style out of the hotel.
It's like there's a word for it in writing. I think it's a palimpsest or palimpsest, I can't remember, where you write over and over and over something. So you have 15 layers of writing, not just one, right? He actually took a key out of his pocket, like the Wizard of Oz or the Mad Hatter or something, and said, I think I have a very nice room for you. And the key sort of glimmered like in a movie, boing, boing, you know. And I realized that whatever the room was, even if it was a broom closet, I would take it. Because after all, if you created the only international meeting place in existence, in which you could have William Burroughs and Bob Dylan and Andy Warhol and Rauschenberg and de Kooning and Milos Forman and 35 other major creative people all staying at the same time and learning by meeting each other and having the opportunity to see each other is a terribly important thing. It's like having a great salon or something, you know?
Exactly.
It's very rare. It's very, very rare. And it continues to be. And I mean, this is like the Alamo of the counterculture at this point.
Alamo,
I think so. I think that people who live here now have crossed the line that Colonel Bowie drew in the sand. Those who want to stay cross this line and die for Texas. And those who want to leave, like, you know, whatever you call people who want to leave, you know, skedaddle now.
What started me was Alexander McQueen was here, and he came to my room and looked at my Healing Waters pictures. And he said, why don't you come and shoot my fashion show? But when I came home, I had my camera on my shoulder, and I just started taking pictures here. I hadn't really thought of doing that, and it's evolved over the last 10 years. And it wasn't like I'm shooting the Chelsea Hotel book. It was, I'm living my life here. This is an incident, that's an incident. And then the last year and a half, I thought, I want to pull this together. Yeah, momentum. That is a momentum, persistence, the long haul, the long-term project. Those are big words in photography. Yes. All right. So that was the wonderful phase of the hotel. But then one day I came home and it said the hotel was closed. And all of Stanley Bard's remains that he could not, I guess, get in a cab and take home with him, he was fired. And this new Joseph Chedrick bought the hotel on August 11th, 2011, something like that, 2011 in August. And it was a shock. So I'm walking by on the street. I picked up the 100th anniversary brochure. His chair was sitting there. It was heartbreaking. So that night, they swept through the hotel and took all the art off the walls. They did officially buy the art that was in the living room that you've all admired. That was part of the sale, but not all the individuals' arts on the wall. And so I think most of the litigation is over, but a number of people had to fight to get their own work back from Joseph Chedrick. And you met Victor. A few pictures to remind you. This is his room. And he also, at this moment, they just said, if you owe any money, you're out. You know, unless you can come up with the money by the first of the month, which Stanley understood that artists went through phases. And he could wait a month or two, or if he knew that your family wrote a note. You know, that was one of the things that made it work for a lot of artists. But not with the new owner. So Victor moved out, and this was he was the first one. I documented his leaving. And then I continued on, and I liked to have cocktail parties. So behind my door there is a very large hallway, and across from the hallway was my personal bathroom, which was a very big bathroom. And on the side was a very small little room that they never rented, but they wouldn't rent to me. But so I essentially incorporated about 25 square hundred feet. But at this time now, we're now 2011, 12, 13, I started documenting because this new owner came right in with a bulldozer and bulldozed my 9th floor and the 7th floor on this right side of the building. The other people did not receive such harsh treatment yet. So unfortunately, they ruined all the bric-a-brac, all the stained windows, and of course, breaking everything down. Finally, the room next to me was broken down. Of course, this led to extreme dust and mold, which, you know, we knew it was happening, but there was no protection yet. And then any room that had been demolished, they painted white and put the X marks the black spot, done, dead, over, locked. And then they came and they put plastic on my door so that the dust would not reach me, except I'm the last bohemian with the bathroom across the hall. I had my private area, but so no one ever saw me go back and forth. But I had to go out. You know how many times you run to the bathroom a day if you're a woman with your makeup and this and that. So I started my physical doctor, Dr. Herbert, suggested I wear this whenever I went out. And then I had to start wearing it when I went into my bathroom. And my eyes started to swell. Now, other floors look like this also, but they didn't have the rest of the rooms knocked down. They just were protected from the dust coming from my floor. So a tenant group was formed who has been a wonderful force for the hotel. By this time, see, I always paid my rent, and I had a rent-stabilized room. I paid a good rent, but I had no reason to think that anything could happen to me, except for this dust. But I hadn't really assessed what it might be doing to me, because you want to live there. So I got a lecture in Leipzig, Germany, and I showed my photographs, and I spoke about what was happening. And I learned that in Dusseldorf and in other great cities, wonderful cultural places were starting to be lost to lack of environmental laws, renovation laws. And then I had a show in Amsterdam, which was very exciting. And many musicians came to that because that's a city of very creative people. And a hotel in Germany bought all the photographs at the show in Amsterdam and brought it to their hotel. And I write about that in the book. Marion and Klaus Bohm. So my pictures will be forever in Germany anyway. And so there's some in the lobby, and then they have in the hallway leading down to their Schwimmbad. And I had a show in Philadelphia where they also face some issues, plus the excitement of the Chelsea and the artists, which we have to celebrate, community. So it's not all negative, but you must know the truth, because the last one to tell it probably. So this is what it looked like to walk out the lobby with all those signs on the windows. And this is what it looked like outside. So for the last year, I have been outside the hotel. I'm not living there. And also, I received the final eviction notice, for which I hired a lawyer and put up a pretty big battle. But even other people in areas where they weren't on my floor started worrying about the dust. And this is not in my book, this is just to share. But every day, I woke up with my eyes stinging and burning. And although my husband did not have this issue, I could not last much longer, and I went across the street to my eye doctor, and he said, you cannot live there. You have to move on. You cannot fight this. And the Chelsea Hotel was unique because it was a live-in hotel, so you needed to show up every day. So we would have to show up, even if we moved secretly to an apartment, we would still have to show up and get our mail and, be living there. So we decided to move on. And this was the last day in my room. So
There's people who wanted to stay at the hotel. He was very particular who stayed here. In fact, he wanted people that really wanted to be here and who had the right combination to make this art combustion. And when people came to visit the hotel, they would say, well, who should we meet? And he would say, you should meet the Troeller. So I would meet someone from a Russian Moscow museum. I mean, they all came here to just touch the memory of Andy Warhol, touch the memory of art, touch the future. And so he had my books on his desk. In fact, Stanley's desk had books this high. And sometimes I would go in and wonder where my book was. Anyway, we're just dialoguing about the future, but I was very excited about those pictures. That's where I watched 9/11 go down. Just being in this very respiratory, difficult environment. But anyway. Anyway, we carry on as artists and people, and I add this because once I moved out, all my clothes had mold in it, and I had to throw everything away. So I made, for me, the right decision. I love the space, and as it turns out, it will be a few more years, and people always ask me, there are 50 people left in the hotel, or 50 to 60. There are 55 people that are assured that they will be able to stay, had all the right ingredients, and they will be taken care of for the rest of their life, and they have been moved out of the hotel, and then their rooms were upgraded, and they're back, and there are about 10 people still in litigation as to whether they can stay or not. It will be a hip hotel, and Mr. Sheets wrote the new owner, who wants to treat people better, but would not change the eviction of me because he bought it with that big chunk of space. So that's the way it goes. But I've been going by, you see that it's making more beautiful pictures even under the construction of its new reality. This is our lobby, and this is Merle. Merle danced down the staircase as a young woman, and she's still surviving there. But it's not very nice inside, and we don't know the future. Next door is this fabulous restaurant, El Coyote, and I hope if you haven't been there, it's really the old New York, and I loved my experience staying there. Now,
Manny had a 99-year lease, and the hotel bought his lease out just a few weeks ago. So you must stop by soon, because this is one of my last pictures, but just a few weeks ago, I'd like to stop there on my way home and have a glass of red wine, and for old time's sake, where Andy Warhol shot Chelsea Girls, where I used to meet wonderful people. I saw these people filling out forms, and I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Oh, they fired 4 of the older waiters, and they're hiring all new ones." So I would say within 6 months, it'll be a tapas bar. So the Chelsea guitar shop is quite small, but it's still there, at least, right? But we have people sleeping in the street in front of the hotel. René Ricard, wonderful poet and artist, has passed on. He lived on my floor. But there's a positive note. So Alpheus Cole, he moved into the hotel at 80. He had a pension then of $1,000. And Stanley Bard said, "Why do you want to stay here?" He said, "I'm a painter, I'm an artist, I want to be at the Chelsea Hotel." And Stanley thought to himself, well, he's 80, how long can he, last? So, he said, "Okay, I want $1,500 for this, but I'll take it." And Alpheus lived to be 112. My eyes are glowing again, and I glow with the idea of telling the truth, of protecting our environment, protecting our renovations, protecting ourselves as artists and people, and with the hope that we remain an art community, how far and wide we travel. And I keep up with some of the other artists, which you'll find in the book. There are many beautiful pictures I didn't include, like Miss Amelia, who became a burlesque dancer, and she married the guy from The Roof. They did leave the hotel, and she has a bestseller on Amazon, The Diary of a Shanghai Showgirl. So also David Remfry is still he's in my book. He's still at the hotel, but away while the dust is there. He went to England. And he has a new book out of his paintings of dogs and their owners. So life moves on, and the hotel about every 6 months has this storefront space where they gave me my goodbye party, where the book publisher came and offered me this book deal. So that was great, and we had Blondie there. So, keep an eye out about every 6 months to keep the myth going. They have an event in the storefront, and this is Zoe and Nick, the blonde in the middle, who started the Tenant Association, and those who are part of that were helped a great deal to stay in the hotel. This is Timothy Connor Sullivan, who has a music group called the Supertones, and Brian Dillon, who live at the hotel. And some other people, I come in for some of the parties. This is our new owner, Ed Sheets, who wants to renew the hotel, but it will take a lot longer than he thought. So.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.